So we'll kick this thing off. Chris Cutting is here. He's one of our beta composers. He consistently puts out bangers. It's usually my go-to first listen of a library is like, what did Chris write for this? How long have you been writing for the beta team?
Early on, I think, right, probably about 10 years now.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I said the last podcast, I was like, I know it's been at least 5 years because you've been around longer than I've been employed.
Yeah, same.
And so that's awesome, man. That's longevity.
So that's like almost from the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah. So back in the day, Mike had posted a contest, and I think it might have been for the Rust Library.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I entered that contest, and afterwards I said, hey, I'd love to write demos for you guys. And he sent me one that day, and the rest is history. I'm very grateful. It's been a fun journey.
That sounds like Mike. As far as like getting started with music, did you have like a musical family? What brought you to music?
Yeah, it is a long story. I'm happy to share, but so both my parents were professional musicians by trade.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what they did. So my dad was a pianist, and he also was a college professor. He taught class piano. He taught MIDI back in the 80s, which was really badass and cool. So every summer as a little kid, he would, bring his whole setup with his DOS computer, all that stuff, home for the summer. And then my mom was also a pianist and an organist, and very, very fortunate. She had a full-size Baldwin grand piano in her house.
Oh, wow.
And so my brothers and I would always just beat that up trying to play. And so yeah, it's always been in our family. So once my brothers and we got to kindergarten, they basically made us take piano lessons, and they had us take lessons from somebody who wasn't them, so that in the hopes that we'd practice. And so at first I loved it. I was doing what my older brother was doing. I was able to learn what my parents were doing. It felt really cool. But I would do this thing where I would get in trouble for not practicing. And then I would go to my lessons and get yelled at for that. And it would reinforce me not wanting to practice. It was this whole cycle. And so for about a year, I begged my parents to let me take art classes instead of piano classes. And finally in fourth grade, they let me do it. One of my dad's piano students, her mom was a really cool artist in Muskegon, Michigan, where I grew up. And he said, hey, would you be willing to take on a student? And she finally said yes. And so it was a new experience for her. She hadn't had students before. I was super excited about it. And so we were both very much invested, and it was exploratory and experimental.
It's a perfect age too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also colorblind, but for some reason I wanted to take art classes.
Okay.
I'm weird like that. So anyways, she would always have really cool music playing when we were working. I'd go over there once a week for a couple hours, and one time she came back from a trip from Vegas that she took with her husband, and she was playing the CD, and she could not stop talking about this show she saw. And it was Mystère by Cirque du Soleil at Treasure Island. And that's back when there's only one cirque show out there in Vegas, and most people had no idea what Cirque du Soleil was, couldn't pronounce it, whatever. But for whatever reason, that music just hit me deep. It resonated, and I was just like, what is this? And it was super inspirational. And I got the bug. And so we went out to, out west on a road trip as a family one year. And I convinced my mom to let us go see that show. They were excited about it. And then I saw Kidam in Chicago. And I really just, got creepily obsessed with cirque back then in the 90s. And I would dissect the albums and really start observing all the different aspects, the different instruments, where they are in the mix, what they're doing. And then I started thinking about, how do you write this? Obviously, there's some improv lines in some areas of some music. And it's like, did the composer come up with those lines, or is that something that he invited the musicians? Is it more collaboratory? Just really got into it. And so then after high school, I made an album, went to college, and had the opportunity to do Disney's college program, and used that as a hope to try and run away and join the circus, because there was a Cirque du Soleil show at Disney called La Nuba. And I get down there, I'm working in the Magic Kingdom and merchandise. I'm all excited. And I bought tickets to the show. Really expensive when you're working on the college program, but I did it. And it really, really cool. And so basically my family came down, my aunts and uncles to visit, and my grandparents, and we were riding up in the elevator to go see the show. They took me to the show. They knew I was excited. They wanted to see it. And being the proud aunt that my Aunt Kathy was, she had to tell the usher, oh my gosh, Chris loves this show. He wants to write music for cirque someday and would love to sing in the show or whatever. Just by chance, the showroom manager at the time, Mark, his big thing was creating magical special experiences that would impact people for their life. Really cool guy. So Joanna said something to him, and after the show, showroom manager Mark comes up to me and says, hey, I'm Mark. Here's my business card. Give me a call sometime and I'll get you VIP seats and a backstage tour. And I had never, I mean, that was the coolest thing in my whole life. That's awesome. That point, I was very obsessed, and like I said, it was creepy, but you know, it was motivating, and I just had this fire inside of me to write music and live a life of music because of experiencing their music. And so anyway, I call him up. I tried to wait a couple weeks, but it was probably like a day because I was so excited. And he said, actually, we're not going to do that. Instead, I want to work with your management team and your leaders to bring you out to Cirque for a week so that you can train as an usher, work at the show, and just see how things are. I said, hell yeah. And so I did. We worked it out, and Mark, being the cool person he was, one show, he had me sit in with the band. And nice. I got to put the headset on. I was up in the tower wearing all black. They had these two towers on either side of the stage where the band was, and you could see in and see out. And I had headset on, and they're like, don't move. People can see you. Cool. It was really cool. I realized I was dialed into somebody's in-ear mix that they were using. And then at one point I saw the singer walk up to me and sing, and I realized I was in her share, and it was super awkward. And it was her mix that I was dialed into though. And then the next show they had me sit in with the drummer. That was really cool because La Nuba, the show I was at, that was one of the 3 or 4 albums that I really studied, and he was the original drummer, and I got to sit in with him. Really cool experience. And then I got to sit in with the lead stage manager Anne-Marie on headset in the light booth, getting to hear her call all the cues for the show. That was amazing. She let me put a headset on and sing in the theater. Of course, it was totally dry, no effects after the show. Really cool. So that just was a huge life experience for me.
Oh, yeah.
Basically moved back to Michigan after I finished my college program, made a second album, brought in some really cool musicians. A friend of mine, Derica Watson, he's a drummer. He flew in to do some work for me. Really cool bass player we got, Joe Ayub. And it was just really cool to do that album. And then I went back down to Florida, worked full time at Disney for a while at Cirque, stayed there for 5 years. But one day I walked into work early, and the composer, Benoit, the person who I studied, was there, and he was doing some work with the band. And so I snuck kind of into the theater. This is way before the show started, before they opened the doors, and I was kind of hanging out. Once he had a break, I went and talked to him, and I had that album I had just made with me. And I'm like, hey man, you're super cool. I learned to write by listening to you. I'd love to share my music with you. And he's like, okay, thanks, man. Cool. And had the next day off. And then I came back the next day, and somebody said, hey, Benoit was looking for you. And I about shit my pants because I thought that was so cool. And so I went back into theater, hung out. He had a break. He came and talked to me, and he was kind of taken back and really impressed. And it really validated what my goals were, and that I wanted to make that a career. Nice. He gave me some great advice. He thought I used the musicians in that show because back then I only had really had Cirque as inspiration. But I was like, no, I brought my own musicians in. And so we had a really good chat, and it was just a really cool experience. And so that's when I decided just to really dive in. And then eventually moved back to Michigan, and I've been working pretty full time, just writing ever since, for Soundiron, for other clients, and for myself, collaborations and whatnot. And obviously I've expanded my influence, repertoire, interests, whatever, quite a bit since then. And so I've definitely diversified my style and tried to come up with my own vibe.
Totally. So what gave you the courage to go talk to that guy?
It was just a subconscious thing. I just did it, you know.
You're just like, I have to talk to you because you're one of my heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was he had to have been a little weirded out because this just random dude is just sitting behind him, just like staring. But once we talked that second day, I was just like, okay, this is cool. What's really wild is in high school, my high school choir is just an awesome choral program. They've set a lot of people up for success. We have so many alumni that have gone on to do amazing things, from Broadway to film to whatever. And so we went down to Disney on a trip. Our choir director was cool enough to let us all go see La Nuba as part of that vacation package we did. And I had dropped off my first album that I made in high school with the sound guide. I was like, hey, I want to write music for you guys. Here's my album. He's like, I can't do anything with this. Send it to our headquarters in Montreal. I'm like, I already did that too, but here's this album. And so once I started working there, I had heard that the original singer of the show, who's no longer there, O'Neill, that got into his hands, and he was a countertenor, and I sing countertenor, and he would sing my music, and he was just really into it. And it was just neat,
Yeah, that's super cool.
Love that. It's very theatrical, complex music, the cirque
It
stuff.
is.
So, like, how did you start breaking that down, or how, like, it seems like kind of overwhelming at the beginning. You're just listening to it over and over again. You're like trying to pinpoint instruments.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just trying to be conscious and becoming one with the different types of chord progressions and melodies and themes that they had brought in to the albums. The other side of it too, and this is to a bigger point, I think that back then people would buy CDs. You'd have an album, it'd be a full listening experience. And now you don't really get so much of that. People listen to the songs they want because everything's available, via download and whatnot. But back then you really could take advantage of that as a composer and create this whole journey through the album, this whole adventure. And obviously in the context of Cirque du Soleil, that is to their advantage. And so that was a highly captivating thing for me, is to see the big picture and see how, the placement of order of the songs and the pieces would fit together in that story they would tell. I really just got captivated and immersed, and I wanted to do that. And definitely their style is outside the box, especially from back then in the 90s when they had their two main composers that had worked on all the shows up until that point. It was just a very unique style. And so, learning from that kind of forced me into that style, I guess, too.
Totally. That's cool. Something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like the attention economy, and basically the idea of we have so much information just flowing in that your time is actually what ends up you being like having poverty in. So like the scarcity aspect, instead of information being scarce like a few hundred years ago, now it's the opposite, where the information is just you're getting bombarded.
Everybody.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, like, maybe you could speak to that too with, seeing the internet, and you've basically had, 15, 20 years of writing music, and like people paying different amounts of attention, or like their attention is kind of scattered, and like, oh, now it's all on TikTok or whatever the newest social media platform is. And so like being a composer through the attention economy, I don't know if you have any words of advice on that.
I think just dialing in what you're doing to what somebody wants. If it's something that is short and you don't have the opportunity to tell a long story, try and find a way to still be narrative and tell a story in what you do. Doing Soundiron demos is a great exercise with that, because you want to showcase something. With that, it's a little different because you want to showcase as many aspects of the instrument possibly as you can.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's a challenge not to go overboard and have too much content, but just try and find a good flow that doesn't overdo it, that is easily picked up by the listener and felt by them.
Totally. So when you first start out a Soundiron cue, what's your beginning? You open the patch, and then what happens?
So I have a couple different approaches. It depends on, I guess, the context of the library, right?
Sure.
So let's say it's a piano library. I'm probably going to start with just the bass library before I dive into checking out the presets. Other libraries, I'll just play around with the presets first. I have a template for Soundiron demos already set up, and then basically I will go through and explore as much as I can in the process, see how it inspires me, what ideas I come up with, and then I'll start recording those. And then you just start dialing it in. I'll scrap well over 50% of those ideas and build off other ones. And then I'll do that again and really just try and find a theme that works well to showcase that instrument.
Love it. What DAW are you using?
Cubase 11.
Okay. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that new Cubase. I'm curious to see what they're gonna do.
Yeah, me too. I actually waited a few versions before I updated to 11 because I was just so happy with, I can't remember if I was on 6 or 7, but
Oh wow.
yeah, I was just happy with it. I was content. I didn't have a need to upgrade, but finally I did. Glad I did, but I still miss some of the old features, mainly some of the layout. I miss the way the whole experience looked and how that influenced the workflow. But I definitely love Cubase.
Yeah, I think I started on 8.5 and just been there ever since. I used to use Logic Pro 9 and then upgraded my Mac, and then I couldn't even use it no more. And I'm just like, I'm not even gonna do that. I was already eyeing Cubase anyway. A bunch of my friends that do either recording or mixing, and people I've watched like Joey Sturgis and my friend Zach, I would see him just blaze through like editing and stuff because like the slip editing and all that stuff. And I was just like, yeah, it has like everything you need.
Composers are absolutely the worst class of people when it comes to not upgrading stuff. Like we're so terrified of updating, and like the IT expert on our team, I'm always having to explain to him, well, they're still on Pro Tools 8 because it runs with their Windows 7 system or whatever, and like they're not gonna update no matter what. Like they're stuck because they have all these sessions they want to open, and they're just like scared of losing everything.
Yeah.
So it is difficult.
That's very true though. Like I about a year and a half ago, I upgraded my iOS finally, and now there are certain projects, no matter what I do, I cannot access those projects.
Yeah.
And it kills me.
Yeah, especially because a lot of film composers or people that are doing music for other projects, they'll probably get hit up, or even like mixing engineers, they'll get hit up like 8 months later by the record label. Oh, we need this mixed, or we need this remastered for this thing, or now we're going to do it on finals, so we need another, master. Like, oh, well, I can't open that no more. I upgraded a year ago, and you're screwed.
Changed DAWs,
yeah.
One thing that I've done is, depending on the nature of the commission or the project, is I will typically just save all the WAV files of all the stems, just so that if I can't access those Cubase projects, I can still at least have something to work with.
Yeah.
So
that's very smart. It's funny, Dom, I don't know if you know who Dom Silas is. He does a lot of stuff for Cubase. Mm-hmm. And he did a video talking about that same exact thing. He's like, back up your projects, like export all your stems, because if a project for some reason doesn't work, you have all that stuff that you can still like give them. So that's a very, very smart move on your part.
Yeah, thank you. Trial and error. You learn from not being able to access something.
Learn the hard way. Okay, so another question for you is, when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused on a cue, or if you've lost your focus temporarily, what do you do?
Yeah, I think stepping away for a short amount of time is really beneficial. And then trying to just get your mind off the music for a few minutes. That's huge. I've also noticed that sometimes I'll take a walk. That helps, just commonsensical, simple things. But then also maybe that's a sign that I need to go in a different direction. And with Soundiron demos, there's been times I've spent a day or two building up a theme, and I kind of get into that funk. And so I start playing around with some of the presets I have loaded, and I'm like, wait a second, I should do this. And I'll scrap all of what I've done and start a new project. And then it just flows so much more fluidly. So don't be scared to start over, even if you have a tight deadline, because sometimes it's going to be in your favor and you'll have a better outcome.
That's a good word. A lot of the times when I'm composing a cue, if it feels like work, you're probably, like hitting your head against the wall, and it's probably not the right move. You want it to feel like play, like you almost like know where the next piece is going to go in, because you're like working a couple steps ahead, and you're like just in that flow state.
Yeah, like where every sound sort of like feels like you're just like doing it naturally. Like you lay a sound down, you go to your next one. All right, cool, this is it. And then you just record it in. You just keep going. It's not like, like when it feels like you have to think too much, that's where it's like, like, because I've done that thing too, where you're like, this is cool, I like where it's going, but there's something that's not right about it. And then sometimes I'll just start muting tracks.
Yeah.
Like I had one where there's like,
Yeah.
I had this like arpeggiator thing going on and a cue that I was working on. And then I was just like, it just sounds too busy. I think it's like the vibe's not there. And I just muted it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's better. And then I just took it out. It's like, all right, doesn't need to be there.
That's an important point, though, too. I think that so many people try to put too much in it. I've definitely struggled with that, especially coming from the influence that with cirque, there's always so much going on visually, and the music's kind of the same. So as I've grown as a composer, one of the things I've done is trying to do exactly what you said and just bring elements out. Even if you're in love with a certain layer in there, it's overall better not to have that in the mix sometimes.
Mm-hmm. It's like musical chess. You got to like plan out your moves. Like, all right, I want to get here, but I'm trying to do all this other stuff. It ain't working. All right, so I got to like rethink my whole strategy. Like, should I just like ditch my game plan or just like find another path? It's just
a chess reference, huh?
I'm gonna ask you,
cool.
Magnus Carlsen. I'm coming out. No, you're right. That would kill me.
What's really cool is that sometimes I'll come up with something that I would not have come up with had I not put those first layers down. And then you end up taking those first layers out altogether. So they still serve a purpose, even though they're not in the final music, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about, something that you mentioned in an email, is that you work full time in a restaurant.
Yeah.
On top of
yeah,
just busting out all these Soundiron bangers. I was like, wow, like that's pretty crazy. I was actually wanting to like hear a little bit more about that, how you got into the restaurant biz.
Yeah, so at Disney, at Cirque, I had the best leadership team. They really inspired me to want to become a leader. And one of my favorite things is creating special experiences for people and giving them memorable service. And so I actually started at where I work now as a bar back about 5 years ago. I wanted to work at a restaurant. I wanted to learn how to bartend. I had some previous leadership experience, and I quickly realized that that was a special place. The owners are the best people I'll ever work for, really strong sense of family, and it felt good to get your ass kicked and have a successful day. Mm-hmm. And so I just realized I had passion there and moved my way up, and now I'm the GM, and we have it's this massive restaurant downtown Grand Rapids called Pepino's. We have 450 seats. We're oftentimes really busy and on a wait. 30% of our business is takeout. On top of that, we're a scratch kitchen. So we sell fried pickles. We buy cucumbers, brine them in-house, slice them up, batter them to order. There's a lot of work that goes into it. We're right by the big arena downtown, so we're always hit when big acts come to town or our local hockey team's playing. There's this huge complex across the street from us with a movie theater, a Canopy by Hilton Hotel. You can live there at their apartments, and really cool area, Grand Rapids. And it's a lot of fun. It's really stressful though, the most stressful thing I've ever done, and you bring the job home with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
I believe it.
Yesterday was my day off. I had like 300 random calls, and I had all these text messages and it's a lot. So I'm also pretty introverted, and one of my favorite things there is actually engaging with guests and building relationships and building up an awesome team and an awesome culture. So coming home after that, it's kind of nice because I can chill with my dog, wind down, and then work on music until around 6-7 every morning. And I know I'm not going to be bothered with any texts, emails, any calls, whatever. And I can just completely focus and dial in. And it's a really nice balance, even though I'm always extremely busy, to have both those jobs and do them both pretty full time.
Nice. So I was going to ask you about hobbies and interests outside music. So do you cook?
Yeah, I do cook sometimes. I'm definitely grateful that we have the best kitchen leadership at my restaurant.
Sure.
It's the best it's ever been since they opened. We're very fortunate to have the crew we have. I enjoy eating their food. But I love to cook as well. I'm definitely not a chef. Other outside interests, every winter, Michigan kind of sucks. So I always need something to get me through the winter. A few years ago, it was learning magic tricks.
Okay.
And then a couple of years ago, it was epoxy, and I got into doing different epoxy things, and that kind of snowballed into my countertops are really dated. I think I'm going to rip them out, put some plywood down, and make epoxy countertops. And then
Nice.
other people saw that. And so now people ask me to do their epoxy countertops. And I just did one about 3 weeks ago, did another one about 2 months ago. And I'm like, I'm happy to do it. It's going to be like 3 months before I can get to you, though. Have patience. Yeah. But for me, that's just another creative outlet. And how cool is it to have your art in some sense in someone's home permanently that they get to utilize and look at every day?
Yeah, I love that. That's practical art.
Yeah. And then just being outside.
So you spent the last 2 years a general manager during COVID, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just been insane, and like takeout worked out for you?
Yeah, it's been a lot. I think we're probably the biggest and busiest restaurant downtown. So obviously we have a lot more logistical challenges.
Right.
And that's especially with staffing over the past year and a half, 2 years. It's been hard for anyone to hire employees. That said, we've been very fortunate. Like I said, we just really more than anything try to create a good culture and sense of family with our crew. This past fall, for example, we're fully open, no restrictions in Michigan with capacity, and we're on a wait, and we got 400 people in there, and we were able to do it. And
nice.
Though our competitors downtown are also our friends, and we don't have this abrasive relationship, we value our neighbors downtown. A lot of them couldn't do that. And Hopcat is a really big brand here in West Michigan. I think Beer Advocate says they're the second best beer bar in the world. And they're like 2 blocks down the street, and they couldn't open on Saturdays with a much smaller dining room because of the staffing issue.
Right.
And so we've been very fortunate in that regard, but we've definitely had our fair share of challenges in Michigan. It was pretty extreme with some of the restrictions, and we were shut down twice for months at a time.
Yeah.
And that obviously benefited our takeout business, but our takeout operation is still just as busy despite the restaurant being open.
Yeah, people got used to different habits for sure.
Exactly.
I know when I used to work for Starbucks, it was like you felt like a crew member on a pirate ship, and like developing that kind of family aspect of like, we're all on this pirate ship, and it's kind of, like us versus the world, that kind of mentality.
Right.
really kept you around longer.
Like, but instead of stealing people's stuff, you're out there giving some
Decaf
fresh
people,
just serving up that coffee brew.
Ooh, I do love my Starbucks coffee brew.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you're not a night owl. Then you said you work till like 6 or 7 in the morning.
Yeah. So typically I don't wake up until I have to get ready to go in for my manager shift at Pepino's, and then I come home and stay up until I can't stay awake anymore, and then I just do it all again the next day.
I know Quincy Jones. We were talking about Quincy Jones a couple episodes ago, and he's a night owl. Like, he loves 2, 3 in the morning. That's his sweet spot, where he's like, I don't get any emails, I don't get any texts or calls. Like, I can actually think, and I can write music and make creative art. So I haven't seen 2 a.m. in a long time, but I respect the hustle.
Yeah. Well, I got an email from you a couple of days ago, and I saw it was about my bedtime. So good for you that you can wake up that early. But Quincy Jones, I can say I agree. You don't have those distractions. There's something to be said about just being able to step into a project or work on something and not have those worries that you're going to be having your phone blown up in the back of your head. Similarly, with doing Soundiron demos, one of the things I love is approaching those demos knowing that there's no boundaries. Like if you're working for a client, more often than not, they're going to come back to you and say, hey, I need you to change this. And you have to be like, okay. And oftentimes that it turns out better because of that. But regardless, stepping into a Soundiron demo, knowing that you just can go on this exploratory, immersive adventure of something new and have as much fun with you want as it to try and showcase that library from the beginning, knowing that you just have that freedom is really cool. And at night, when you also don't have to worry about distractions, it's just so much fun to be able to work. If I work in the afternoon before I head into my other job, or if it's my day off, I do have a hard time finding my flow.
Yeah, I think it's really important when it comes to, because we have so many composers on the team, to let the library speak to them. It's like if we were to give everyone a brief, like, make this thing that sounds like this, all the demos would sound the same. So it's like, how do these sounds inspire you? Because you could be like dabbling on one, sound or patch or whatever, and you're like, oh, like make a whole track based off of that. Maybe it ends up sounding like a funk thing. Because your demos they definitely vary. They're always like
Genre,
very,
yeah.
very, very well produced, but very like, they always showcase everything, and you always do library onlys, which is awesome, and it really helps showcase all the sounds. But it's like, it's like watching a movie, but then like before everyone watches a movie, like this is what this movie's about.
Right.
Like versus just letting people kind of interpret it for themselves. So that's like the thing I like to do is just like, all right, do your thing, write whatever inspires you, because that's the way it should be. It's like because then what you're gonna do with it. You're like, oh, I've explored it. I know what I can do or what I want to do.
A lot of the times, let's say a library I'm working on a demo for, and it's something like a piano, or it's something like, just for example, if there was an acoustic guitar library, you want to showcase that, right? And it's like I'm working on it, and there's all these cool presets, and I could do all this cool stuff with those and go in a completely different direction, so it might not sound like a guitar library necessarily. And I've always been nervous to do that, but at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of beta composers, and most people are probably going to go in the direction of trying to make it, reflect it in a way that the main instrument naturally is. Those presets are also there for a reason. And so I oftentimes will take that approach of doing something more outside the box because I want to, it's fun, but also it maybe broadens the assortment of demos that you guys would have to be able to showcase that when you release it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because a lot of the effects presets are very like use one and just kind of run with it from there. Or because like sometimes we might have a library that sounds very like natural or like a very like organic thing, but then the effects presets can like make it in like you could turn it into like an electronic thing.
Right.
So then it's like, well, should I go that route, or should I like make it as like natural? But like sometimes, yeah, it's just cool. Like I don't know. I always have a tendency to make everything sound like dark and sad. So that's just me.
Yeah, Craig and I never.
Luckily, Nathan is the complete opposite. Like Nathan will never.
Nathans are so happy, like, and yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool because it's nice to like see how it works for everyone. It really just comes down to it's cool to see that there's different use cases for something too. It's not always,
it's creativity without boundaries to an extent, right? It's kind of what is fun about creativity. You get to feel like you're a child when you're playing with these and have fun. And it seems like that's increasingly harder to do in today's world, right? Another thing, with the presets, I utilize those a lot as certain layers, but I also try to sometimes dial them in ways that fit what I'm going for. But one of my favorite things is going into the main instrument, you have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 is typically ambiances or something like that. And I love exploring those, especially because you can utilize the offset and start that sample in a new spot. And you can dial in a specific tone or vibe and then play with the release and add one of the built-in effects reverbs. I've mentioned that in some emails. Those are my favorite things, is the effects long, effects short, and seeing how those work with some of those different settings. And so utilizing those ambiances, you can really create a keyboard sound or an organ sound or a mallet style sound.
What are some hobbies or interests that you haven't explored yet that you want to get into? Anything that you've been like wanting to try new? Or
there's so many things. Lately I've been into reverse perspective art. What that is, first time I saw that was on the Haunted Mansion right at Disney when I was a kid. And basically you're in the Doom buggy and you're moving around and there's these busts on the wall that follow you. And they don't stick out towards you, they stick in. And it creates this really cool optical illusion so that whatever you're looking at follows you in a way that's really trippy. We have this competition in Grand Rapids every year called Art Prize. Started out as the world's largest publicly juried art competition. People come from all over the world. It takes over the whole city. This past summer at Pepino's, we were fortunate enough to get this badass 30-foot tall fire-breathing robot in our parking lot by this Denver-based artist, Shane Evans. And he climbs up inside the chest and moves the arms out and the hands shoot fire and the mouth does, the shoulders. And he let me get in there and play with it. Really super cool, dude. But one of the things downtown was a reverse perspective art piece. And it really hit home that that's something I wanted to explore. And so I ordered some supplies to try and create one. And that's on my back burner list of things to do here is try and build something. And I've watched some YouTube videos on some other people who have. And so, yeah, you'll see some of that sometime soon, I'm sure.
Nice.
So I always try to have some creative outlet, not just music that I'm dabbling with.
That's smart. All right, I got a couple questions here. What is the best advice you've been given? And that can be in composing or it can be in leadership.
Best advice I've been giving in music was actually from Benoit, the composer for La Nuba. And he said, don't be afraid to spread your music out, to really explore a theme. And that's something I don't do enough of with Soundiron demos. I just can't set those down, and I have too much fun with them. But the album I gave to him, he was like, look, you have like 2 or 3 albums of music in here. Really explore these themes more and develop them. And he was, spot on. That's great advice. And obviously it's going to be different depending on the context of what you're using that music for. But in general, that's just really good advice.
So he was saying like sit in certain themes longer and like explore them more,
explore
go
variations.
Deeper. Yep.
Okay. Instead of just throwing every bit of paint you have at the wall.
Exactly.
And seeing what sticks. Okay.
It's kind of like, Craig mentioned you remove some tracks or you mute some tracks and then you can better the music. And that's part of it. It's part of the same
addition by
advice.
subtraction.
Exactly.
Do you normally do like conceptual type albums, or are they just like, are each songs kind of like its own topic, or do you like to explore more like conceptual albums, like where themes come back or come in different ways?
Yeah, no, I love telling a story. I'm going to be fighting this nobody has CDs anymore that forces you to take this whole expansive journey thing for the rest of my life. I'm always going to be the type of composer that loves being able to explore a story or a journey over a whole project.
Long form,
exactly. And that just creates more opportunity with the individual songs or pieces to be able to explore some common themes in different ways and come up with new ideas in the process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of concept albums. I think it's really cool to hear. It's like, like an audio movie or something,
Yeah.
Or it's like, because a lot of times with film music, there is themes. A lot of like older movies nowadays, sometimes there's maybe not as many themes, or it's more like sound design or
right.
that
more
sort of
just
thing.
Layering of patterns.
Exactly.
Right.
But like I've always loved like how a different theme, could be used in one context and then come back and maybe use a piece or flip the melody, or like when you listen to like classical music, it'll be like bin dun din do 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 din, and then it'll play it again, but dun 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 do do din din and and that top melody will then now play lower, and then it'll just keep like. But it's like little things like when I come across, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll try to like take that and remember it or something.
I do like if you have a theme, you have a melody, utilizing that melody obviously in different sections of that long form project, but changing the melody line to create a different emotion, to change the storyline. You could, have that melody shift into something else to take you somewhere darker or create some tension, or you could use that same melody with completely different chords and have a completely different feel. I also love to take patterns. A lot of the times I'll find in working with the Soundiron library, doing a demo, certain presets or something, you can get some really cool patterns, and bringing those back and having them interact with different patterns or a different melody and trying to use those same patterns in different ways, or taking that melodic pattern and using it with a different preset or a different section of that library. That's a lot of fun too, bringing that back and having it in a different feel, a different vibe.
Yeah, that's the thing I think is really cool about the like having the arpeggiation for different layers, because especially for percussion, you can have one where it's like, and the other one's like, and you can like, sometimes I'll do that. I'll have like completely different like percussive rhythms, and then I'll like pan one layer to one side, pan to the other, have like an ambience going on. You can even put some like rhythmic elements on that too. So you can almost like, it almost sounds like there's a few different people jamming together at one time with just one patch, and then you can like fade stuff in. So it's like that's the thing I always find fun, especially when making effects presets, is that you can just like how much juice can I get out of this one NKI, you know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
kind of like, oh, maybe that saved me having to load up 2 other tracks because this is already kind of like doing all that, or you can modify it, or that sort of thing.
Right. Same.
Craig is giving away the secret sauce here.
Watch the walkthroughs. I show you guys these things. Just watch the walkthroughs.
So Chris, what advice would you give to someone starting out? Someone starting out composing, they just graduated college, they're trying to get their feet wet, they don't know a lot, but they're trying to learn.
Yeah. I'd say, especially if you're going to college for music, throw away a bunch of the rules. I think that oftentimes, there are some great music schools where there are some amazing teachers, especially in the world of composition, but there's also the opposite. And regardless, find your own style. You can learn about the rules of classical music. Don't do this, do that. But, we're in 2022. Have fun. I'd say also listen. I'd say ego gets in the way of, if you focus on ego at any point, you're not focusing on learning, you're not focusing on your weaknesses. So that's just a life lesson in general. I think ego is never good, but that's just how I live my life. And, just be humble and try and observe and learn from other people's mistakes as well as their successes, and learn from your own as well.
Yeah.
And never stop learning and challenging yourself. I'm grateful that I get to do Soundiron demos because it's consistent and it's always fun and it's always something new. And but it's also a great exercise.
Yeah.
It keeps you in shape. And so, that's important, that if you're starting out, you don't have work, still write, still try, still work on things, come up with things. You never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, I like that you have a variety of hobbies and interests. And I think, something that Craig and I talk about a lot is film scoring is very pragmatic. Like it's a relationship business. It's not really a robotically composed classical music and you'll have success. It's like, no, it's about networking and like meeting people, making cool stuff, and then making cool stuff alongside them, and it's like a group project.
Right.
So it's you definitely learn a lot of the wrong things in school.
Yeah. And you also obviously benefit from school, but you definitely learn a lot of the wrong things for sure.
Yeah, I've always heard a lot of people, the things that they've got a lot from being in school is the connections that they've made and the friends that they've made, and that sort of thing. But a lot of them would probably tell you I could have probably learned any of that stuff somewhere else, but that's usually the thing that I've always heard people take from going to school, which it's still it's a good life experience, and meeting people and learning from people. You take stuff, even small little things. You could take one thing. Oh, I was hanging out with this guy and I was watching him, play guitar or keyboard, and that little thing he did had just always kind of stuck. And it's these little things you take along the way. And
yeah, and I think too, how many success stories are there, and just in general, not just in music, of people who started what they're doing in life now through meeting someone else in school. I think that's how Facebook got started, right? Mm-hmm. Just in general. And so that leads to some other great advice is collaboration can be great. If you have the opportunity to collaborate, you're going to learn from it. They're going to learn from it. You're going to have a great experience. For me, the coolest thing I feel like I've ever done was I used to be in a band called Oarsmen, and it was awesome because it was truly collaboration, and it was with my friends, my best friends, and we all grew from that, and it was a really cool experience.
Nice. I listened to some of the music on your website from Oarsmen. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, no, we just some buddies, and my buddy Noah, he was, I was creepily obsessed with Cirque du Soleil 20 years ago. He was that way with this band called Death Heaven, but he also introduced me to bands like Alcest, Russian Circles, and a couple others, and that really influenced me a lot. And so we just came up with some cool music, and released in an EP. It was me, Noah, and a friend Angel who did drums, and Angel's phenomenal. That turned out really cool. And then we started working on a couple other ones, and one of them, the newer ones, was a banger. But it still gets me. I wish I still want to record that. But ultimately what happened was, we've been together for a couple of years. We wanted to bring in another guitar player so we could do some live performances. And so we're bringing this second guitar player. After one of the practices, he started talking about how he didn't think we should have civil rights laws, how businesses should be able to turn people away because they're Black or because they're gay. And I am like an openly gay man. And so that obviously didn't sit well with me.
Sure.
And so just look, man, that's not cool. There's clear reasons why we have to have those protections in place. And I just said, I'm not cool with being in a band with somebody who's going to be outspoken about those things.
Totally.
Right. The opposite take. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just so caught off guard because he was such a cool dude. But that really shook us and we couldn't really recover. And so we just kind of stopped practicing. It's really too bad. But I'm never one to seek revenge or anything like that, but he did leave his guitar at my house for a couple of years and wouldn't pick it up. So to get some closure, I auctioned it off on Facebook. And I said, whoever is willing to make the biggest donation to the NAACP or else a local LGBT charity, it's yours. I'll send it to you for free. And this really cool friend, awesome composer, Jordan Chin, he's out in California. He donated to a local LGBT charity here in Grand Rapids, and I sent him the guitar. And
Okay.
I'm happy that there's at least some cool end of the story there. And I value all the time I had with that band, and I love those guys, and it was a cool experience.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Do you have a favorite YouTube channel or podcast or TV show at the moment? Doesn't have to be like all-time favorite. Something you're enjoying right now.
I always try to watch YouTube to fall asleep at night, and then I end up getting captivated. And I'm all over the place, and it changes every couple of weeks. There's this dude named Jacob. He has a channel called The Carpetbagger, and he travels the lower 48, going to roadside attractions and all these just cool places. And so I got into him for a while. There's this dude, really eccentric dude who has a channel where he just pans for gold. That's kind of fun.
Nice.
I got into magnet fishing videos recently where people throw magnets.
I've gone down that rabbit hole for sure.
I don't know, just anything and everything. I surprisingly don't listen to much music though, or follow many musicians online, and that's one of my weaknesses. I try to explore other outlets, I guess.
I understand that too, though, because like you don't want to be like constantly in the music pond, so to speak.
Well, I feel like too, I find there's some really cool music that I just love out there, and it just moves me. But I find that when I'm not listening to music, the ideas tend to flow quite a bit better. It's almost like there's a buildup on the inside of something. And so, sometimes when I'm heading into a project, I won't listen to anything for a while. And then I just kind of have a clear mind, and it's easier to dial things in and come up with ideas.
It feels more original if you're writing and not not inputting a bunch of music.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people always come up with these great ideas when they're just taking a shower or in the bathroom, like
going on a walk.
That's it. You're like, it's like when you're
least
expecting it. Like I personally love to cook and like learn new stuff. Like, because ever since I switched to like a plant-based diet, I was like, I can't go to restaurants because I'll be spending so much money. So it's like, I'll be like, I just want to do that as something new. And then from there, you'd be like cooking or just kind of like enjoying that process and putting stuff together. And like, you'll start to think of like musical things, even though you're not even doing it, but it's just because your mind is away from it. It'll just find its way to like creep back in like, hey, I know you're doing something else, but remember that thing you were working on? Like, oh, that was it.
Right. I get that a lot when I'm driving. We're driving somewhere and I'll have this idea, and then I want to pull up my phone to record it while I'm driving, which I don't do. But then I get to where I'm going and like singing in my car to my phone. I look like an idiot, and it's worth it every time. You get some cool ideas when you're least expecting them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just funny when people listen back to them. They're like, "What is this?
Yeah,
what are all these little like
the humming?"
Right. So obviously I run a bar. I do the beer ordering in my studio. In the other room, I have a built-in theater, and I have a draft tower down there. So I oftentimes I'm drinking when I'm working, and then I'll go upstairs and step away for a little bit. But so I'm usually a little bit under the influence when I'm working. And I go back and listen to some of these ideas that I've laid down. I have this whole backlog of just different ideas. And sometimes I have no idea like what's even going on, because I was probably exhausted and a little buzzed, and I can't connect with that idea. But typically they're in pretty good shape, and I can, oh yeah, that's what that was, and oh, that's what I wanted to do here, and I'll just have those to work with. But sometimes not so much.
Yeah. What's your favorite kind of beer to drink?
Bell's Two Hearted.
Oh, I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's an IPA. Bell's is out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, south of us. It's just the most drinkable beer. I love it. And
you
it's
hear
a really
how fast
cool brewery.
he hear how fast he came up with that answer?
I was actually wondering if you were
"Bam."
gonna ask me, actually, so I was ready.
Yeah,
You were.
I had that one. Yeah.
How about you? What's your favorite beer?
I'm boring on the beer side. I don't partake. When I did, I really liked Yingling. I hate IPAs, so we don't get along on that front.
It's okay.
You just called him out right now.
I just hate sour.
melted.
I hate sour stuff. Like the whole coffee trend of like very bright coffees. I hate that too. I want just like a medium dark roast and leave me alone.
I've been a fan of the Heffenweizens. Like I love like Mexican beer. Like I'll drink like Dos Equis or Corona Pacifico, whatever. Lately, I feel like whenever I go out to bars or anything, it's usually like Heffenweizens. Like out here, there's a few different places, but like there's this one called like Drake's Heffenweizen, and like there's this one I was drinking called Hef Leopard. So I'm sure you can see where they
sounds
got
awesome.
But I always love those. There's a few different breweries around here that have some really good ones. I just can't do IPAs. I feel like I'm like drinking a tree mixed with like
a tree,
like a heavy lunch meal. I'm just like, it's just like, oh, I can't.
So Grand Rapids it's one of the reasons Grand Rapids has grown so much is because of beer. Founders Brewery, they're like 3 blocks from where I work, and that really kind of put Grand Rapids on the map. And now there's just there's a brewery on every corner. I live in this cool little neighborhood in the city, very small, brewery right on the corner. Mm-hmm. And so beer is just kind of a part of the culture here. Mm-hmm. IPAs are pretty prominent here. I agree, no liquor, but for whatever reason, I just love IPAs. And my favorite of all time, actually, you mentioned drinking a tree or something like that, is called Wild Spruce Chase, also from Bell's Brewery. It was a very limited release that they had over the holidays, but it was an IPA with spruce, and it tasted like a Christmas tree, and it was the best thing in the world.
Super piney.
Yeah, and if I could get kegs of that for my basement for the rest of my life, I'd be a happy man. I could drink that beer and no other beer for the rest of my life.
Just have a tap right inside the studio.
Yeah.
That's
just infuse some pine needles in there, and I'm good to go.
I love it. Okay, the last question I have for you is, do you have any personal projects you're excited about / what's next for you in 2022?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I connected with Francesca Genko.
Yeah.
And nice. She said, hey, if you ever want to do a collaboration, I said, hell yeah, I'd love to. And so we've been talking about that. And there's a Soundiron demo I did called Within for one of the Olympus core libraries. And I thought that would be the perfect thing to see if she'd want to work on. So it's something that's on my back burner list. I need to get it done, but I want to change it. I'm changing the key and I want to extend it, but I just haven't been happy with finding the right direction that I want it to go with, especially bringing her into there and her vocal range and style. So that's probably the thing on my front burner list here to get going. And then obviously I mentioned the reverse perspective art. That's something I want to start, learning how to do more of and see if I can come up with something there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You got to send me some photos of that when you start doing it.
I totally will.
Oh, yeah.
I totally will.
I want a video though, so I can get the full experience.
Yeah, you definitely need the video to see what's up.
The time lapse. With the Francesca thing, have you considered like setting a deadline for yourself? Because I know for me, deadlines are like the number one thing that helped me just get stuff done.
I have a love-hate relationship with deadlines. I think a lot of people do. Yeah. But I also agree, for me, deadlines help me get stuff done. And I also find myself, when I'm pushed against a deadline, getting more invested in what I'm doing and more excited about it. So that's absolutely something I should do.
Yeah, and I think kicking it over to her, She has a lot of like very creative, great ideas. So she might be able to help you, before it's completely finished or like
Yeah.
up to spec. I think you could just kick it over and say like, you can hit her with the, it's rough, like this
Do
mix
your
isn't
thing.
done.
Well, I thought about sending her a couple different options and being like, what do you think fits your style more? Like
Sure.
option A or B with this completely different section in one versus the other. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So that's definitely a good way to go. Maybe see what she's feeling.
Yeah, she's a really great person to collaborate with. We were doing a sale on her vocal library, and we were talking about the idea of collaborating, where I had wrote a track using her vocal library as inspiration for me building it, and then I sent it over to her. Like, all right, here's what I did using your library, but then here's also one without any of your vocals. And she sent me like 3 tracks that were just all amazing.
Improv, right?
Yeah, she would just improv, just like one pass, go through everything, just whatever she was feeling, she just laid it down, did another one, and then did another one, and then I would do. She was like, "All right, just use whatever you want," and I would just like take little snippets from this and this, and it came out really cool. But yeah, she's definitely like, she gets it. Whatever you send her, she'll put her vibe on it, and it was really cool.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm motivated again. I appreciate it. Also, talking to her, one thing that was really cool is she said in the 80s she went to school here in Grand Rapids. She went to college here, and that blew me away. And she was like, I doubt it's still there, but there was this really cool restaurant called Yesterdog that we would go to. And I was like, oh yeah, it's still here. It's like a Grand Rapids icon, basically. It's a super cool hot dog place. But I thought that was a really cool connection.
This big world just gets smaller and smaller every day.
Yes, it does. I actually have some questions for you guys, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I'm kind of turning the tables a little bit. What got you into the music industry? Why are you guys doing what you're doing?
My grandmother got me into music, and my aunt, and my parents weren't really musical, but they encouraged my musicality a lot. And then when I was 18, I watched Avatar, and it kind of clicked for me that, oh, people make a living writing music for other things, like for scores. Somebody's job, James Horner's job, was creating this score, and it's like a masterpiece to me, even though it's like a copy of a previous movie. But basically, at that point, I was like, all right, I'm definitely going to school for music business, and I definitely want to work in music technology and play with synths and VSTs. And so I was in bands through high school, and music's been a part of my life for a long time. But the initial draw was family based, and then, kind of finding my little niche, my little corner of it with Soundiron has been like a great thing over the past 5 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like I didn't come from a musical family at all. I heard that my dad was trying to be a drummer or something when I was a baby, and I heard he was not good. Sorry, pops. But yeah, I was actually really into art, and I actually even like at one point kind of wanted to get into acting because I was a huge Jim Carrey fan. Don't really talk about that, but like that was like really fun. But me and a friend were like, hey, let's start a band. Okay. He had an acoustic guitar, so I was like, well, I'll play drums. I actually wanted to drum first. That didn't happen. Ended up getting a guitar super cheap from a friend in high school, and just like kind of fell in love with it. I was like, I grew up a huge like Metallica fan. That was like my first favorite band, I guess. And then I just started doing the band thing, trying to get signed, tour, and do all that stuff. And I've always loved classical music and film and orchestral stuff, and always wanted to blend that with like death metal, what I was doing at the time. And it's funny because like how I found out about Soundiron was I was looking for like a virtual choir to use on something that I was working on. And then I always wanted to do something, within the music industry, whether it was, guitar related or VSTs. I love doing that kind of stuff. So ever since, I've been working with Soundiron, it's just been awesome. Super fun job. But, I get to meet cool people and, all the time, and
get to talk to Chris Cutting.
Cutting. I have more questions though.
What you got?
What have your biggest musical influences been?
Shoot, man. For me, it varies. Like it kind of depends in style, because I grew up, like I mentioned with like Metallica, and then I started getting into like other bands, like heavier bands, like and then I started listening to Cannibal Corpse, and then I started listening to this. Then I was like really into John Williams or orchestral, so it's kind of like it really varies. But probably if I had to like pick like a top 5, man, like maybe like Metallica, Cannibal Corpse, so many like guitar players like Jason Becker. He's an amazing guitar player who actually developed ALS, and he couldn't play anymore.
Hmm.
But he developed this like system for being able to communicate, and would actually like tell people, like, all right, play these notes, and his dad would help him and stuff, and he would still write music. The fact that he's in a wheelchair and can't move, the only thing he
Wow.
could really move is like slightly, like his eyes, and then like maybe like little bits of his face. He's just a huge inspiration to me, because like he was just like ready to take over the world, but then he got hit with this horrible disease, but he still kept making music, and I've always found that so inspiring. It's crazy to see like when life throws you something like a curveball that heavy, what you do with it. It's like you can let it take over your whole life, or you can say, I'm going to still make something happen, and it's just a testament to his like musical ability, and like how much he did in his short time before that happened. I mean, I love great orchestral music. I mean, like John Williams is a huge inspiration to me, just because it's like, it's such a, like, he's such a staple in it, but like just hearing like great orchestration, and there's so many awesome composers that do orchestral music, but like I just love like good orchestral music, just because it's always just it's crazy to hear like, okay, there's like someone who's writing all of these pieces or all these musical things for all these different sections, and like there's it's like watching a great chess player. Here's another chess analogy, you know what I mean? It's like because there's so many ways you can move, like it's an infinite amount of possibilities, and what people choose to do with those possibilities is always really intriguing to me.
I think a lot of people getting into composing, they're so intimidated by orchestral work because of those things, right? But there are limitless possibilities in some ways, and again, throw away some of the rules, explore, come up with your own style. And with classical, there are those rules, but then with some orchestral stuff for film, that's where some composers have really come up with their own style, is by just taking those rules away and doing their own thing with different instruments and different aspects of the mix. And it is fun to listen to different people's approaches and how they fill the space or choose to not fill certain space.
Yeah, another guy I'd probably say is Danny Elfman, just for that
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
Like came from the band background and just like
Boingo boingo.
did it his way, and it became a thing. And then when it's like, oh, that sounds too much like Danny Elfman, or if they're like, oh, his thing, like he created a sound that you're like, that it's very identifiable. And yeah, he's probably the other one I would mention that's just like had a pretty big impact, especially what Nathan was saying with like the Avatar thing, like where I like kind of connected the music with the visual. Like, wow, it was a scene in like when the snow's falling towards the end of Edward Scissorhands, and just like these sweeping melodies, and it's just like, wow, like it just like with the music and the visuals is just so magical, and it's like, wow, like I never really like put that two together until then.
When I was 14, my guitar teacher gave me 2 CDs. He gave me the Beatles' Rubber Soul, and he gave me Radiohead in Rainbows. And so I just wore those 2 CDs out, and they definitely influenced my high school music making quite a bit. Then other influences would be John Mayer, Charlie Hunter. I'm guitar primary, so those guys are just magicians on stage. And then as far as like film, Alan Silvestri and Danny Elfman are the goats for me.
I love that. Alan Silvestri, Back to the Future. That is the most, in my opinion, I love so many soundtracks, but that is the most magical soundtrack of all time.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And just because, as a kid too, listening to that, so much more magical as a kid to hear that and feel the music. And then, super cool.
It sticks with you.
It does.
It's just crazy. It's like, dude did Forrest Gump, and then he does Avengers. Like, how cool is that? Just like,
right. He's so diverse.
So diverse. Yeah. And
he's also a super nice guy. Like he's very down to earth and humble, even though he has a vineyard in Northern California and is killing it. But I've met him, and he's very nice.
That's super cool. I have a couple more questions. Where do you see the virtual instrument heading? Like, how do you think it's going to change in the future? What do you see here 10, 15 years from now with virtual instruments?
For me, 10 to 15 years is like a lifetime away, because if you look at 10 to 15 years back, like if you go to 2005, 2007 and think about what we were doing then, it's like, okay, like Soundiron didn't exist back then.
Right.
I would say like in the next 5 years, I'm interested in how we can use computers and artificial intelligence to help do mundane stuff. Like Sean Chasen came on here and he was talking about like an assistant, like a virtual assistant AI that would flesh out an orchestration for you. So like double melodies in certain instruments or do fifths, like stack fifths, and basically create counterpoint for you to speed up your workflow. And like there's like a give and take there, right? Because at some point the robot's just composing for you and you're not doing any creative work. But I think some of the mundane tasks of cleaning up MIDI, for instance, that would be nice to take some of that away. As far as, trying to make an instrument more real, it's tough to think about, like, do we need more mic positions? Is that the answer? Just like 25 mic positions? I don't really know exactly like what takes sampling to the next level. I know that like modeling is something to explore, with like Omnisphere and the spectrosonic stuff. They're all about modeling, which is algorithmically programming a sound instead of sampling each note and velocity. But it will be interesting to see what the industry looks like in 5 years. Like, I think it'll be pretty recognizable still, but I think there will be a lot more tools for getting started and for kind of like getting from the beginning to the end quickly.
Yeah, just getting the job done. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really looking forward, because like with technology, it's just getting better and better, like exponentially quicker. So it's like, in that amount of time, we could be doing some really wild things, and the future is always exciting, especially with like MIDI technology and the new things that are coming out with the new MIDI stuff. And for me, like like what Nathan was saying, it's just all about like how can I like use technology to like make what I want to get out quicker, because like there's always so many technological things that can get in the way. So it's like just cleaning all that stuff up and just making it to where you can just go from like concept to a product. I mean, with the AI thing, I think is cool, like if used in a way where it's more of like an assisted type thing, but still allowing you to generate the concept from your head, yourself, and allow yourself to just like get it done. And I'm really looking forward to seeing like where like plugins go, as far as like, I mean, they're already really good as far as like recreating like outboard gear and stuff, especially with amp sims. They're just getting better and better. And it's like, before, I remember when you're trying to like get a good guitar tone and every amp sim just sounded like horse ass, and you're just like, this ain't working, but now it's like there's so many good things that just sound awesome. So it's just like I'm really looking forward just to see where technology goes.
There's also a pendulum swing of like, give the user as many options as possible and make it as optionality focused as possible. And then the other side is like, the user doesn't want a bunch of options, they just want like a palette to explore. And so you can see that with different companies, like going back and forth with like, here's 25 different NKIs that all break out specific sections, or here's just one NKI preset that has everything you need. And like with this new product, Sonespheres for direction, we were just talking about it before the pod, which is, it's like a toolkit or like a paint palette. It's a very specific set of colors that you can use. And I think for now, users are really interested in just grabbing like that set of colors rather than you giving them every option and them having to cycle through just tons of different stuff.
Mm-hmm. So the Sonespheres for direction, I just got to say that was one of the coolest demos to work on. That library is so accessible and it resonates so clearly with, I mean, you get it right away. You get what it is right away.
Yeah, you can hear the emotion in it.
Exactly. And I mean, that's going to be a go-to library for me for so many different projects, because you just step in there and you're instantly inspired.
Yeah.
And just really, really nicely done.
Yeah, that's a tribute to Blake. He's a very talented and creative sound designer, and the colors that he was creating for this library, because each are very like specific, they all have their own sort of vibe, and this one is no different. And it's funny, like sometimes walkthroughs come out shorter, sometimes they come out longer, and this was one of those ones that just kind of like, sometimes I'm demoing the patches and playing through stuff and I just can't help but just kind of like drift off. And this library is like one of those where I'm just like, I almost just want to like stop filming and like, all right, I'm gonna just like write this track real quick. Right. But yeah, it's just like so fun, and like there's so many different like sounds that really like, if you blend them together, they have an even more kind of magical sound. But just each one like are total cue starters, in my opinion. It's just really, really fun to work with.
For sure. Also, going back to what you said about getting what's in your head out to audible reality quicker with technology. Like 10 years ago, I remember going to Chicago Museum of Science and Industry, and they had this table two people could sit at, and there was a clear tube that pointed towards each person with a ball in the middle, and you put a headset on, and your brain activity would push the ball to the other side. And it was a battle, and whoever could turn their brain off, basically, would be able to push that ball to the other side and win. And there's been some other advancements in that, but since then I've thought, how cool would it be if I could just write something in my head and have that translate into a DAW? And I think that's a really long ways off. I think that's terrifying as an idea, but I also think it's a really cool idea. But ultimately someday that'd be really cool. Just, you have everything written in your head, and then you can just translate that into reality by thinking it.
Yeah, that would be wild, especially because like I think there are kind of times when you're writing music, or if you're working on orchestral stuff, like you can kind of like see and hear this like blurry orchestra playing something, but maybe there's like a clear melody, but you can kind of like hear a general like rhythmic thing or something behind it. And that would be pretty wild to like imagine a whole thing. I mean, unless like, you're like, all right, cool, I want to start off with like, rhythms, and you just kind of like think the rhythm, and then like it's going to be on percussion, and then it just starts programming that or something. Like that would be
right.
I don't know, maybe Elon Musk will have that for us in like the next 4 years.
Mind to MIDI.
Nice.
Yeah.
Trademark it.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's really simple, actually. It's not that difficult. It's probably coming along with Skynet. Then it's all
Hopefully Skynet's second.
Yeah.
Get some fun.
Let me get a couple tracks in first before you go ahead and just annihilate everybody. But yeah, it's like really, really cool to have you on and get to chat with you. I mean, I know I talk with you all the time through emails, and hey, we got another thing. It's like always moving. So it's, thank you so much for everything that you've done and contributing for all of the libraries and making them sound awesome.
We'll have to come eat at your restaurant too.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're ever in Grand Rapids, Michigan, man, we'll treat you.
Awesome, dude. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right, Craig, catch you next week.
See ya. Same time, same place.
Right. Peace.
All right. Later.